Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of my therapy talk. And I'm talking today about why I still think every single lawyer, law student, articling student should go to therapy. Don't agree with me? Listen to this episode and part 1 and see. And if you still don't agree, then say it in the comments. Really, I'm waiting for my first negative comment. It'll be really good rejection therapy for me. So go ahead, make my day. Part 1 of my therapy talk is here. Let's see if I can actually make that work with the link in the box. So I recommend checking that out because that's where I get into why I think a lot of lawyers are hesitant to go to therapy, why so many people think they might not need it, and why people think they're a failure if they do. And I tell a very personal story about not getting into law school the first time and what I did to get into law school the second time. So grab a tea, hear the tea, then come back here. So for a preface, I'm not a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist. I'm a lawyer and I'm a therapy aficionado. I started in undergrad. I've taken very little time off therapy ever since then. And I'm very lucky to work with some incredible therapists. And I have one now who just fits the bill perfectly. So the first thing I want to say is don't be afraid to try out a new therapist if the one you have isn't working after a few sessions. And I don't mean not working as in they challenge me, they don't agree with everything I say. I'm just looking for someone to validate me because that's not always what therapy is about. You'll know in your gut whether they're a right fit. So don't be afraid to make a switch if they're truly not for you. There's someone out there who is, many actually. So don't be afraid to shop around. I want to do a little visualization exercise, just super quick to help demonstrate why I think therapy can be so helpful, and I hope it helps. So I want you to imagine your emotional capacity, your emotional space as a big old garden shed. Stay with me. You can make it whatever color you want. Mine is blue with white trim, which is hilarious because that wasn't on purpose. Then I want you to picture your feelings, your thoughts, thing you perceive to be quote unquote problems as a massive tangled web of stuff. I'm talking tarps. I'm talking old wooden lawn chairs, gardening tools, some bags of old clothing you meant to donate but haven't gotten around to yet. Those are your unresolved traumas, things in your past you never talked about, things in your present that are bugging you, but you don't feel you have the time or the energy to deal with. Now, maybe your whole shed doesn't look like this. Maybe there's a clean corner, a corner you're able to use for your woodworking or potting some new plants. You keep that corner free of stuff. You keep it clean so you can use it for your everyday tasks. But all the other stuff is still there, stacked up in various half-sorted piles. And while you might be able to move around in a corner of that space, use some of it without having to climb over the piles of stuff, it's still there. So yes, while you can use this cute shed to store whatever you need, insert existing, living, doing what you need to do, there's just a whole bunch of stuff that isn't serving you, that's just taking up valuable space. So let's say you come to that realization now. You want to sort it, get rid of some stuff, which is baggage. Deal with some emotions that you realize are impacting your day-to-day and see what in there can be useful for you to cope, coping skills, happy thoughts, goals and dreams, things you're thankful for. But every time you open that door, you just see a bunch of stuff and you're like, F it, not dealing with that today. And you go to your little corner and you pull out your little basil plant and you leave the pile for another time. And every single time you open the door, you just see a pile of stuff. And you're like, nope, not today.
Do not walk away from me. Do not. You are not. You're doing it.
But then something happens in your life. It's stressful, it's sad, it's bad, or it's great. Or something happens in the life of someone you love or work with, and it requires a tool that's in that shed. Empathy, understanding, the ability to be a bit emotionally unattached or non-reactive, but you have no idea to access it because it's under a pile of shit. Or it's mixed in, or you've never even had it and you don't know how useful it could be because your parents never had one in their shed. Are you still with me on this garden shed analogy? Good. It's going somewhere, I promise. A lot of people might think or expect therapy to be hiring someone to come in, clean and organize your shed for you, throw away the junk and just make a cute little pile of things you want to keep. And a lot of people go into therapy expecting this, and then they're sorely disappointed when it doesn't meet their expectations. Or others, many people have that same expectation and think, I don't need someone to come in and solve my problems for me. I can organize my own shed next week, next month, when I need to. Whatever, it's fine. It's what a shed is supposed to look like. It'll just stay the way it is because it's always worked for me. Sound familiar? But what if you thought about therapy as having an organizational expert buddy who shows up with a new, trained, fresh set of eyes and takes a look?
That one's the dump.
They're both your locker.
You meet with them for the first time and you tell them, I have this shed. It's full of stuff. I don't even know what's in there. I can only use a little corner because it's the only part that feels like it's working how a shed should. And I just ignore the rest. This is a lot of people wanting to try therapy, but not knowing exactly why, or knowing they need it, but not knowing exactly why. Or you might have a very specific thing you need help with.
It's a general store, but it's also a very specific store.
And you're like, there's this family of aggressive possums that just keeps moving into my shed and eating all of my seeds, and I want to find a way to deal with them, but I can't because the shed is just so messy. This is the kind of person who knows exactly that there's a specific issue in their life that they have to try and deal with. But a therapist in either situation will come in and they'll take a look at your shed. A very non-judgmental look because they've seen it all. And boy, have they seen it all. Your shed is not the most disorganized shed they've ever seen. And they start over the course of the coming days and weeks helping you sort through it all. They ask you some basic questions. What do you want to use your shed for? Did you grow up with parents who had a shed that looked something like this or something different? That's where the generational trauma starts coming in. You start pointing them to items in the shed, and they also start noticing things in there. This therapist will ask you specific questions, and maybe after an appointment or two, you can identify certain things you want to use the shed for, but don't feel equipped to, and the specific items in there that might be useful to you. And other items you need to deal with, maybe get rid of or put in a box. And then they help you sort through and place things into helpful piles. Things you can deal with in short order, other things that will take time and effort to deal with, and all sorts of helpful and happy items that you can either now see clearly or utilize now because they've been buried under a bunch of broken patio furniture that's now in the trash pile. That's my garden shed analogy for what a therapist can do for you. And it was quite the journey. So if you're still here, thank you. But I just hope that that analogy explains one of what I think is the biggest advantages of therapy. But even then, even if you accept that analogy and understand it, some people, and I've been some people, may think, okay, I can do that on my own. But can you? Have you? The shed's been like that for many years, my friend, and you don't have to do it on your own. And if you could or were willing or able, wouldn't you have done it already? Okay, so if we're talking about the human experience, why is this thing called therapy so helpful, particularly for lawyers and law students? Well, there are as many reasons lawyers need therapy as there are lawyers, because every lawyer is different. But I will get into a few. And I think they're ones that a lot of us deal with. Chances are you experience some form of the Sunday scaries. And it might only happen on Sundays, but it might happen every day of the week. Or your mind wakes up at 3 a.m. and all you have running through your head is, did I ever reply to that email? I should take out my work phone and check. Or your loving partner has told you that you complain about work all the time and that they're worried about you. A few off the top of my head, I think that a lot of us deal with are work stress, lack of sleep, potentially poor nutrition, not enough time to exercise or feeling guilty when you do. These things all deplete our ability to be able to healthily respond to stressful situations. Being sleep and nutrient deprived doesn't make your mind any sharper. Too much work stress creeping into your head during your family dinner time probably doesn't make for a pleasant and fun family event. And even if you do take out the time to exercise or try to be present with your family, are you checking your work emails while you're out on your run? During your weightlifting class? I've done both of those things. Are you getting a call on New Year's Eve at 8 p.m. from your workplace asking you for an article to be written by the next day, but it's New Year's Eve and you're at a bar in a different country? I swear on all that is holy, this actually happened to me. These intrusions into your everyday life, when the last thing you want to talk or think about is work, can in and of themselves cause stress, anxiety, and anger. Lots of anger.
3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3. What the heck is bothering me?
We also deal with tough topics and mean people. Did you ever see that How I Met Your Mother episode, The Chain of Screaming, where someone's kid yells at them and then they go into the office and yell at their employees, who then come home from work and yell at their spouse? And it's just a whole thing. And while that's obviously meant to be satire or exaggerated, it can be really true. A decision comes back from the courts and it's against you. Sometimes a judge yells at you in front of a courtroom full of people. Sometimes our clients are mean. If we all just can admit that these situations bring up very justified emotions that we need to learn to welcome and confront and deal with in a healthy way, I think more lawyers would be in therapy. Now, I have a whole episode on perfectionism, but we also have to deal with a perfectionist mindset, getting called out by a partner for some typos in a memo that was already filed with the court. Or you messed up your dockets and now accounting is after you, but you don't have the time to go over a month of dockets because you barely have time to enter your dockets for this month.
I said, give me time.
We think we need to be perfect because if we aren't perfect, if we don't do things perfectly, we get into trouble. And that might be true. You make a mistake and sometimes it goes unnoticed, but sometimes it comes back to bite you in the butt. But maybe the trick to being okay with that, just acknowledging that it's part of life, a part of being a busy lawyer, knowing things will get missed, is knowing that if you have the mental strength to remain calm, maybe after an initial freak out, and say, okay, how can we fix this? I promise you that skill can go such an incredibly long way in your practice and in your life. And by the way, I'm still working on that every day. But just as importantly, are you able to not take that out on your family, on your friends, on your roommates, on your cat, whatever, when you get home and just want to shut down for the day? I've heard of so many lawyers who have either hit burnout or have been in a workplace situation where they're miserable and they take it out on their families and their relationships suffer. Their friends can no longer stand to hear them griping about work every time they hang out. Yes, your family, your friends, they're there to support you, but you can't shift this burden to them. It doesn't alleviate yours, and it only adds more stress to their lives if the only way you deal with this stress is to just unload on anyone around you. We all need to learn, for the most part, how to self-soothe, how to talk ourselves down in stressful times, and how to switch off work whenever and however you can. And therapy is amazing for that. If only it gives you a set place and a set time to work through some of that stress. The more tools in your toolbox, the better you'll be able to deal with stressful situations when they arise. Your therapist can also help you work through roadblocks that could be keeping you from obtaining or keeping some healthy habits. They can also assist you with putting into practice good self-care rituals and talk through your reasons for wanting or needing to do that. In law school, my therapist put me in touch with a really great nutritionist when I was struggling to eat properly, and she, after like 2 or 3 appointments, gave me some really good tips, but I wouldn't have found her if I didn't go to therapy. So it can open up a bunch of roads that way too. But the reality of our jobs is that there is substance abuse, there is burnout, there are mental health issues. And I don't care what anyone says, they can't pay you enough or give you enough fancy coffee machines and amazing dinners with clients to combat those. And you can have the most amazing boss with supportive staff, but we literally work in a field that is mostly built around conflict. I personally am a litigator. On every single file I have, there's someone on the other side whose interests are largely counter to mine. There's this joke that I love where a doctor and a lawyer are talking about whose job is harder. And the doctor turns to the lawyer and says, "Your job's harder than mine." The lawyer's like, "What are you talking about?" And the doctor says, "Well, when I'm in the operating room and I'm trying to save my patient's life, everyone in the room has the same objective. If I were a lawyer, there would be someone else in the room continually stabbing my patient as I try to save their life." When I heard that for the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, like a light bulb went off. I'm not saying being a lawyer is harder than being any sort of doctor. I would have failed the MCAT. It kind of speaks to the nature of what we do in a funny way. But at the same time, how is that not stressful? How does that not warrant some kind of, I just want to go home and have a massive glass of wine at the end of the day? But when that starts becoming every day, you got to find a new way to cope. Here's another thing I want you to think about. Think about all of the hard work, the years of studying, and if you're a lawyer, your practice up to this point. And yes, the money you spent on getting there, high six figures of student debt. Now, what if I told you that there are lots of studies regarding substance abuse in the legal profession and on lawyers' mental health? Based on some studies I read, it's quite common for things like alcohol dependency or substance abuse to be mentioned in a lawyer's disciplinary proceedings. Sometimes the very thing that gave the lawyer the ability to face the day, such as a little drink in the morning, becomes the very thing that puts them before the professional disciplinary board. And that's unfortunate. It's the very system we come up in that we're trying to cope with and stay afloat in that can, in all honesty, be the reason for that habit to develop and then punishes us when things get too far. This is the American Bar Association in 2014, but there's an article that says that at least 25% of attorneys who face formal disciplinary charges from their state bar are identified as suffering from an addiction or other mental illness, and that substance abuse plays a role in 60% of those. Substance abuse also played a role in 60% of all malpractice claims and 80% of all trust fund violation cases. Now, I am not saying that people who go and develop a kind of habit will be before a formal disciplinary hearing, nor that everyone who ends up before the disciplinary committee has an addiction or mental illness. But the connection is there, and it's significant enough that I certainly, as a practicing lawyer, have seen an uptick in the number of mental health professional development programs and speakers at day-long conferences, usually involving someone there to talk to us about self-care and mental health. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that therapy can be absolutely monumental in helping you nip some bad feelings in the bud before they start to snowball into something out of your control. Even if things are going great, think of therapy as mental health insurance. What do I mean by that? Let's say you're going through a tough time. You didn't make partner at work, or your kid is getting bullied at school. Whatever the reason, you decide to start therapy. Amazing. After some sessions, you feel better. You think, okay, cool. I don't need this therapy anymore. I'm good to go. Before you cancel your next appointment, I want you to think about your life and the ups and the downs. And life is a roller coaster. We don't know when that next up or next down is going to show up. And if it's all ups for a while, perhaps you and your therapist can use that time where you're in a really happy period, not necessarily to do like crisis control, but maybe get into the weeds about a certain thing you're curious about. I don't know what that might be. That's up to you. But maybe you can get into some more long-term behavioral stuff you want to talk to your therapist about. But if you only go to therapy when something is bad, something is wrong, you'll always be in that crisis control moment, and you'll never really get into the underlying things that I think a lot of us should talk to our therapists about. Getting therapy does not make you weak. Look, it's 2025. I really hope we're past the stigma of therapy. But in the legal profession, there's a whole lot of people, what I'll call the old guard, although age has nothing to do with it, young lawyers can have that attitude too, that look at therapy as being something that only people who are mentally ill or sick or crazy need. And that's just not the case. A lot of lawyers I know think that they don't need therapy because we're supposed to be tough, resilient. We did all of this being getting good grades in undergrad, doing well on the LSAT, surviving law school, passing the bar, and now being a lawyer. And if I did all of that, I can deal with these feelings and these problems on my own too. Okay, great. Go with that. See how far you get. But chances are, if you're listening to this episode, you're at least open to the idea of therapy. Or maybe you could look at it like this and think, people, clients come to me for my training in the law. Yes, technically someone can write up their own will. An individual can write up a statement of claim and serve and file it with the court and represent themselves. I can register the paperwork to my own small business on my own. I don't need a lawyer. But you as a lawyer understand that we have the tools, the resources, the knowledge, and the experience to assist with those types of things that are not as simple as one may think. Yes, technically they could do it on their own, but you're the professional. And there are these people out there that are called psychologists and counselors and mental health professionals.
You know, I'm hearing a lot of latent anger here, Benjamin.
And your mental health is just the same as your physical health that you would go to a doctor for. So learning ways to improve and deal with your mental health are just the same as someone else trying to start a lawsuit or trying to buy a house or who's rolled their ankle. Those things require professionals who understand what's going on, have the strategies to overcome whatever problems might come up. So why do we think that our job is so important that it requires us to do it, but we're so smart that we can do the jobs of other professionals too? Isn't it time we put our pride away? All right, that was part 2 of my talk on therapy. Originally, I thought it was going to be 1 part, then I thought maybe 2 parts, but as it turns out, I'm really passionate about this topic, especially when it comes to what it can do for lawyers and law students. And I think there's a lot to unpack here. So if you haven't checked out part 1, do so now and keep an eye out for part 3. There will probably only be a part 3. Probably not a part 4 too. But who knows? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So be sure to follow us on Instagram, comment, like, subscribe, do all of the things, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Is that alright? Is that alright? There's a lot. This should totally be sponsored by BetterHelp.